Live from our hurricane headquarters with real-time analysis from some of the nation's top meteorologists, this is Tracking the Tropics, powered by Bose Electric.
Welcome to Tracking the Tropics. It's Tuesday at 12:30, one of our regularly scheduled programs, but judging by the map, you would think maybe it was one of our extra programs where we hop on as soon as something starts to develop in the tropics that you need to know about. But once again, it is our regularly scheduled program, so I want to bring in our guest meteorologist. It's Chief Meteorologist Scott Roberts from my neck of the woods in Savannah, Georgia, and we have, as usual, Meteorologist Juliana Mejia. She does the heavy lifting as far as Tracking the Tropics goes. Welcome, you guys.
Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you. Happy Tuesday.
Yes. And we have so much to talk about, but I want to let everyone know that's watching, this is an interactive program. When we want to answer your questions, we want to hear your comments, we want to hear what you have to say. I know you guys have some vacations and cruises planned that you might be worried about with all these swirls out there in the tropics. In order for us to see your comments and bring them on screen here and answer them, you have to use one of our branded hashtags. So start your comment with hashtag Hey Rebecca, hashtag Hey Juliana, or hashtag Hey Scott, and we will be able to bring those hashtags. We'll be able to answer those questions and those comments because for the first time this season, we have a lot to talk about on Tracking the Tropics.
It's been a long time coming.
It has been. It's been eerily quiet, Scott. I know you've probably been watching the tropics just like we have going, what's going on? But I like it.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see how quiet the season could be. Even in the peak of hurricane season, we didn't even have any tropical waves to talk about for a couple of weeks. We do our own little Tracking the Tropics segment during our newscast here, and it's like, well, it's all quiet, and, well, more quiet is on the way, but certainly not the case anymore, like a light switch.
Absolutely. Things have heated up, and I know that is what everyone is tuning in to hear. So I'm going to send it over to Juliana to tell us what is going on with everything that's going on in the tropics.
A whole bunch to talk about. Yeah. So just to start off and kind of get her out of the way, Gabrielle here, Hurricane Gabrielle at a powerful Category 4, kind of overshot the initial forecast, had been forecasted to become a major hurricane, Cat 3, but this went up to that 140 mile per hour Category 4. Some cool bullet points here about Gabrielle. Rapidly intensified 65 miles per hour within an 18-hour time span. So that's actually twice the normal pace of rapid intensification, or the criteria for something to be considered rapidly intensifying. And that's actually something I know Chief Meteorologist Jeff Barradelli pulled the stats together about max intensification rates with tropical systems have actually increased, specifically about 29% since the 70s and 80s, which I'm sure we're probably all feeling and very much seeing that season after season, where we truly do see rapid intensification just so much more often, so much more frequently. So Gabrielle is no exception there. Category 4 maintaining kind of that strength here throughout this morning. Going to just float its way out to the east, northern and eastern portions of the Atlantic. This is actually forecast to bring impacts to the Azores Islands here through the later part of this week as a hurricane, potentially a weakening Category 2. But one way or another, this is getting farther and farther away from the United States, which is the good news. Now, there is more to talk about with Invest 93L and Invest 94L. So the red X farthest to the east has been named 93L because it has better odds of developing altogether, but especially in the short term. So that's why it's highlighted in red. There's a look at, just to keep us all in the loop as well. I know people love to ask about Saharan dust. That is what has largely kept the tropics quiet for so long. Now both of these systems are farther to the west and will have a better opportunity to get out away from that dry air. And so we're going to be looking here over the next day or two for the X in red to potentially become at least a tropical depression, if not then both systems potentially becoming tropical depressions or named storms. There's a look at the European model. So with the first wave, there's kind of a lot to break down here. Let's start with the wave to the left or to the west. This has those medium chances of developing in the long-term forecast, so in the week-long forecast. For the next 24, 48 hours, really not going to do a whole lot for folks, visiting the Bahamas or even portions of the Greater Antilles. messy precipitation, some storms, but not really looking to be necessarily an organized system. That's not to say that it couldn't potentially become, close a low pressure system or a tropical depression here, but it's just not super likely. And really that has not been the signal from forecast models so far. What has been a consistent signal is that Invest 93L to the east, the circle you see on the right, organizes faster and gets better organized altogether. Then more locally across the Southeast United States, we're going to be tracking, looking to this upcoming weekend and the top of the next work week, a cold front, which is going to be a nice hurricane blocker, a nice tropical system blocker. So for us here in the Tampa Bay area, neither of these systems are concerned. And really the eastern seaboard of the United States, we'll just want to keep a close eye on the progress of both of these. But as of right now, the wave that is currently closest and looking to reach the portions of the coastal United States, the eastern coast, is looking, really disorganized and on the weaker side in general, especially because it's looking to interact with this frontal system, if not getting kind of sucked up into it. I will also note what I mentioned this morning is that some forecast models are also showing the potential for interaction between these two systems, and them almost merging or blending together before interacting with this cold front. So there's a whole myriad of factors that we're just going to have to wait and see, because once we get a closed low, once we get a potentially named system out of either of these, forecast models will perform infinitely better than they can right now, with the lack of an organized low. So there you also visually then see the better organization circulation that's likely out of what could be either Umberto or Imelda. Likely to be Umberto though, first with Invest 93L farthest to the east, just because that'll pop up first. That'll pop off first, I should say, and organize first. So here's a look at that as well in the moisture tracker forecast. So locally, it's actually not funny, but kind of funny in a way. We're here in the Bay Area. Of course, we're all eyes on the tropics, and we want to keep you in the know. We're going to be enjoying a little batch dry air behind that cold front because it's going to block those systems. It's really going to keep things away from at least Florida. Timing things out, of course, that'll all come down to the precise timing of that front. But I had some folks in the stream I did this morning on Facebook, asking about the Carolinas. And yes, we're tracking this frontal system, which is already going to bring some, active weather, some precipitation. But then you'll want to keep a close eye on the progress of what could then be Umberto there, or Invest 93L at the very least. So let's look at the spaghetti models, because this is also a very helpful visualization. Unfortunately, the data is taking its time to load into our system. So this is from Weather Nerds, showing this is the European ensembles. And it's a little messy and it can be kind of hard to see, but you get the idea of Invest 94L, which is the one farthest to the left, coming the closest to the coastal United States, whereas it is looking like Invest 93L, farthest to the east, has a solid chance of staying out to sea and staying out in almost kind of trailing behind Gabrielle. And now the American ensembles here are much more spread out and much more variable. So you get the idea that we're really going to have to kind of wait and see, and we'll get a better idea over the next day or so. A lot, though, playing into this, the dip in the jet stream being the generator of this cold front. So the upper levels will actually also be supporting this blocking mechanism and protecting Florida, protecting a good portion of the southeast United States at that as well. And that's all going to help then generate wind shear. So that's a big part of the reason why the interaction of one or both of these systems with this frontal boundary is going to be a helpful thing, generally speaking, because of the wind shear that then helps to generate. So kind of, a lot to break down and a lot of factors here. But I want to bring in, Scott, Rebecca, if you guys have any thoughts or maybe something I missed, because there is so much to cover with this forecast.
I just love that front. I think that's our favorite front we've ever seen, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm definitely hoping that the front does come to fruition. The timing works out just right, that it doesn't end up a situation where it just helps to steer it right into the coast, which we sometimes see, unfortunately, this time of the year. This is actually a kind of a similar pattern, a similar area of genesis from Hurricane Hugo back in 1989, which got pulled into the coast of South Carolina, making major landfall in the Charleston area. And it did kind of, the tropical waves started to come together in a similar area to invest 94L. So anytime there's something forming that close, just north of the islands, we do need to keep a close eye on until we really get more of that data that says, yeah, it's not going to be an issue, or it is going to be an issue. Right now, not concerned, certainly, but I think at the very least, any of that moisture coming toward the southeastern coast, it doesn't take much for us to have high surf and rip currents and even some minor coastal flooding with even a moderate onshore wind for us along the Georgia coast, and of course the South Carolina low country. Doesn't take much for it to flood in that area. Rob Fowler, chief meteorologist up in at our sister station WCBD Charleston, he likes to say if someone spits in downtown Charleston, it floods. So anytime we have something like this along the coast, we do keep an eye on it.
Yeah, they don't call it the low country for no reason. And
Exactly.
you guys have had consistent northeasterly winds between that and the moon phase. You've had some flooding tides already across the East Coast in that area. So this is going to be something to watch. But right now, it just looks like we could really luck out with the timing of this front. And that's what we're hoping for. Now, the timings
Absolutely.
of fronts this far out is a tad mercurial. So that's one of the reasons that we're watching it so closely. But right now, I'm pretty optimistic. And so are a lot of our commenters in the question section. And so once again, ask a question, use a hashtag. That way we can see those questions. The hashtags you need to start your comment with are hashtag Hey Rebecca, hashtag Hey Juliana, or hashtag Hey Scott. And this one coming in from Andrew Brown, hashtag Hey Rebecca, is there any new technology forecasters have been using this season? There is. We've been so excited about the integration of artificial intelligence into some of the models. And so what they're doing right now is they're keeping the traditional models like the Euro, like the GFS as normal. And that way we're getting that baseline. And then they're adding, like for the Euro, they added AI into it, and it's called the Euro AI model. And so we're constantly checking as to how that's performing. And we had an episode of Tracking the Tropics earlier this season. Because it's been so quiet, we had to dive deep on some topics. And so we actually interviewed a person at the National Hurricane Center who's in charge of integrating artificial intelligence into their forecasting technology. And he said what we will be most impressed by is how fast it gets better, because traditional forecast models don't improve at a rate that's impressive at all. But he expects the artificial intelligence aspect of it to learn and teach itself at a rate that we've never seen before. So I know we've been excited about AI. How about you, Scott?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be building upon a lot of the technology that we've been using for a long time. I kind of like to say that computer models in general are a form of artificial intelligence, doing a lot of the computer equations, or a lot of the mathematical equations, I should say, that we use for forecasting. If we were to use traditional hand forecasting to do every variable by hand, I mean, we'd have blackboards and blackboards covered with equations. It would take us until next week to figure out what the forecast is going to be for tomorrow afternoon. So really, it has been a form of artificial intelligence for a long time, and we've had some things called MOS data, model output statistics, for a long time that helped to tweak the raw computer model data to kind of learn from, okay, that typically says this is what we end up with actually. So that's what the AI is really going to build upon very quickly, just in a very fast kind of algorithm, since it works very differently from the traditional models, even the traditional model output statistics. So it's going to be fascinating to see how quickly accuracy and precision forecasting for tropical activity will become, whether it's the path and the intensity, because we always talk about how the forecast intensity plots are, say, off by a category or so, and that's what you have to plan for, with especially now with rapid intensification becoming a greater thing over the years.
Absolutely. And it's never fair to point out one particular storm, but the Euro AI model did call the wave before, the wave that we thought was going to end up being Gabrielle, it called it fizzling from the very beginning. And that's exactly what happened. So that's kind of fun to watch. And so we'll continue to point out idiosyncrasies like that. And eventually we'll have a better consensus on what it's good at and what it's not so good at. We got another awesome question coming in. And this leads us to talk about one of my favorite meteorological phenomenons on the planet. Hey, Juliana, are the two waves close enough to interact with each other, which lets us weather nerds talk about the Fujiwara effect? Woo, woo, woo.
That's what we need too. We need the fish storm like sound effect and look, and we need a Fujiwara.
We do.
That would be That would be something. I have not myself, at least seen the Fuji like in real time, I guess.
Yeah.
So yes, technically. So right now, no, but in the like I said earlier, there are forecast models that are pointing to the potential that they interact with each other, and of course, it'll all depend how it shakes out, what that looks like. Will all depend on the strength of the two. Will all depend on whether or not maybe we get an organized system out of Invest 94L, the one farthest to the west, so on and so forth. But yes, the answer is yes. They will eventually be and look to be close enough that they could interact with each other.
And just to catch you up, in case you're not quite as nerdy as we are, and maybe you went to parties in high school instead, the Fujiwara effect is when two storms are close enough together, they do this adorable little dance around each other. And so that's what, if you look it up on satellite, every time it's ever happened, they record the satellite and put it on the internet. So if you're interested in the Fujiwara effect like we are, there's plenty out there to enjoy. I don't think these are quite close enough for that, and I think they're moving in a more homogeneous direction, so I don't think we're going to get it out of these two, but it will be fun to watch.
Yeah.
Of course.
All right, we've got another one. We're going to toss this one Scott's way. Is the front going to bring storms to Florida?
Well, anytime this time of the year, you have a stronger front moving into the southeast. We do have to watch out for that potential for some thunderstorms. So we have the potential here in the coastal empire and the low country of a few stronger storms going into Thursday and Friday with that front moving through. And depending on how strong it actually is, certainly it's not out of the question for at least a few stronger storms down in the Florida peninsula, but mainly just some thunderstorms will be coming along with that. And of course, the drier and slightly cooler air will move in after it. So it's we're now in September. It is a secondary severe weather season in the southeast. It's a season of transition from the hot summer to the cool winter. So anytime you get that type of setup, just like in the spring, you do have that potential, even if it's a low end one.
And we finally got a front about a week and a half ago that brought us some lower humidity, and that was about a month earlier than Tampa gets it. You guys get a little bit more fall up there in Savannah than we do in Tampa, and so these fronts seem a little early for Tampa standards. But
even for here, we were enjoying about a week and a half leading up to before we started fall with very low humidity, temperatures in the upper 70s and lower 80s. Everyone was excited. Yes, fall's here already, and now that we are in fall, we're talking about above normal temperatures back in the 90s with high humidity for the next few days.
Oof, 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 goodness. Okay, hashtag Hey Juliana, how many hurricanes are we expecting this season? And we just hope we're wrong.
Really
we want to be wrong.
It'd really be nice to be wrong. So there's a look at the forecast. 8 from CSU, 5 to 9, right around the same range from NOAA. Average is set when we're talking specifically hurricanes. Typically on average we see 7, so we'll see how this plays out, but we are behind. We've been now we're catching up a little bit, but it had been slow and below average almost across the board in every way throughout the season. Typically, September 19th is when we see our second major hurricane, I believe. And we saw Gabrielle become a major on the 21st, 22nd. So, slow to the roll, but we got there eventually. But there is this, I think this helps with where we're at so far. So typically on average, we see 9 named systems by this point, so we're slacking there. Hurricanes, we've only, 2, and they've both been the major hurricanes. And so, again, what the forecast calls for, we are hoping just doesn't even happen.
Yeah, we're happily running behind this season.
Fantastic. But unfortunately, with how quiet it's been, as far as that activity, I mean, there's just more energy actually available for us to have some of those stronger storms intensify more quickly, just because the water hasn't been turned over with any type of even weaker storms ahead of that to get the upwelling to cool off the waters a little bit. So we do have to keep an eye on the Caribbean and the Gulf have been very quiet this season. So I think even as we head into the next few weeks, as that main development region shifts more back to the west, we're really going to have to keep an eye on the Caribbean and the Gulf, because there is a lot of energy to tap into since it's been so quiet.
All right, we've got another question coming in. This one's for you, Scott. This is from Vay. Hey, Scott, will it hit North Carolina?
I think at the very least at this point, based upon the guidance that we've been looking at, we will have at least some sort of impacts for the Carolinas, especially out into the Outer Banks in the way of some high surf and rip currents with the model plots that you see right there on your screen. A lot of it takes it right toward eastern North Carolina. So whether it develops into something of, a strong system, a tropical storm or hurricane, or if it stays weak as a tropical wave or even a tropical depression, we're going to have at least some minor impacts, high surf, rip currents, and some minor coastal flooding likely as that low tracks up the coast. So it's definitely a forecast to keep an eye on.
And I can't help but think about what a different day we were having last year leading up to Helene. And we had already, unfortunately, had Debbie kind of push through our area as well. And I know Helene was not only a Florida storm, Helene went on to do significant damage, even in your area, Scott.
Yeah, as far as like actual tropical winds, Helene produced some of the strongest winds in my market area that stretches from middle Georgia toward the coast. Actually, for the first time, we did have hurricane force winds in the western part of our viewing area. The highest in our area in Alma, in the southwestern corner of our viewing area, down in the south central Georgia, actually had wind gusts of 100 miles per hour. And there's a swath of damage that extends from the south Georgia border through middle Georgia, just to the east of Macon, up into the Augusta area, where millions of trees were damaged and toppled, and the landscape looks very different than it did just 1 year ago before that storm moved through, especially up in the Augusta area. There are areas, I worked up there for a number of years, about 10 years ago, and seeing pictures from the aftermath, that some of the neighborhoods in and around the Augusta area are unrecognizable compared to what I lived in when I was working there. So definitely it was a powerful system. We had 6 and 7 inches of rain in our area, which did cause some issues. Certainly nothing like what we had with Debbie earlier in the season last year. We did have a tropical storm Debbie moving through our area, and we had a lot of inland flooding. And with Helene, it was a major hurricane as it was entering southern Georgia. It's still a hurricane as it was moving through middle Georgia, and both of those systems are reminders as to that inland areas could be hugely impacted by tropical systems. And of course, with Helene, what we saw up in North Carolina, the mountains of North Carolina, especially in the Asheville area, where 20 and 25 inches of rain fell in a very short amount of time, flooding neighborhoods out, changing the landscape forever. Definitely generational, benchmark kind of memorable storm. And it just always is a reminder that when we are in hurricane season, you need to think about the tropical forecast, even if you live hundreds of miles away from the coast. Yeah, the coast certainly gets the impacts first, but we can see systems stall out, dump a lot of rain, and cause a lot more damage than even for those coastal communities. So never let your guard down.
Absolutely. And then moving forward, you talk about changing the landscape. There's so much timberland over the western parts of your viewing area.
Yeah.
You will see a high fire danger for seasons and seasons to come because of all the dead vegetation. So
Absolutely.
It's just compounding, unfortunately.
Yeah, it will take a long time for that to grow back. I know I saw some drone video from in around Clarks Hill Lake up by Augusta, where it's managed by the U.S. Department of Forestry and some other federal agencies, where they've been collecting, trying to pull out a lot of that dead timber. And there's a plot of land where it's several acres, where there's just mountains and mountains of logs and branches that they're trying to dispose of to help lower that fire danger that we would have. And it's going to take a long time for that cleanup to definitely be completed. So you're right on that the fire danger will be higher during drought situations. And we are actually going into a little bit of a drought in Georgia. We've had ebbs and flows, where we've had feast or famine this year with rain across the southeast. And now we're kind of getting into a drier pattern. So we'll have to watch out for that as we head into the winter.
Well, we are also approaching the 1 year anniversary of Hurricane Milton, which did significant damage along our area. And so this is the time of the year where we do see the bigger hurricanes, the stronger hurricanes, the major hurricanes, and oftentimes they are impacting parts of the southeast. September is more of an East Coast month, but as we shift into October, we do have to worry more about the West Coast again. And that weird bend in the flow there, that's because of fronts. And so what our nightmare scenario in October here in Tampa Bay is that a hurricane is entering the Gulf. It hits a front, much like the one we're talking about, that's going to keep things away from the coast by the weekend, and it turns it into the coast instead. And so fronts are a two-edged sword. They can act like a wall and keep things away from the coastline, but they can also steer them either into Tampa Bay, into the Carolinas, like it did with Hurricane Hugo. And so when we start dancing with fronts in tropical systems, a lot of times it is something to be a little cautious of.
Absolutely, and of course, one of the last strongest storm that made landfall in Florida in the southeastern U.S. back in 2018, Hurricane Michael, came together in the Western Caribbean. It was a weak tropical wave, exploded into a Cat 5 as it was moving toward the Panhandle, Florida, making landfall near Mexico Beach. I was working in Dothan, Alabama at the time, so just inland, and we had the strongest winds in that part of the country for the first time ever. They had extreme wind warnings issued. Not making landfall as a Cat 5 based upon the advisories, but of course with a post-analysis. So the fourth Cat 5 system to make landfall was an October storm forming in the Caribbean, trekking through the Gulf.
Yeah, October storms, I-named storms, those are the kind of danger zone. They retire the names of particularly deadly or dangerous storms, and that's why we're getting into some really funky I-names. We've got Imelda this year. I think Isaias is coming back next year, and so they're kind of running out of I-names, if you will. Hopefully we don't have to retire any this year. We've only got a few more minutes, so this is the last call for questions, but I want to give the floor to Scott Roberts and your thoughts on hurricane season and what you're kind of seeing out there and what you want people to know.
Well, as far as hurricane season so far, it's been eerily quiet, especially as far as impacts on the U.S. So we can't let our guard down. We always talk about it takes one storm for it to be a bad season locally. And these two tropical waves that we're watching, invest 93L and 94L in the Atlantic right now, are reminders that you need to be prepared. Have a plan ready. Be ready to react if any of these storms were to come in our direction. You always want to have that hurricane kit ready to go, that plan to prepare the house. Think about where you would go. You always want to run from the water and hide from the wind. So you want to think about those things and never let your guard down. Even though it's been a quiet season, it could be one of those situations where one really bad storm makes landfall somewhere in the southeastern U.S., especially as we do get into later in the season with the October storms that we talk about that are a little bit sometimes stronger and a little bit more of an issue, especially for the Gulf Coast of the U.S. Hurricane Charlie is one that I remember from back when I was in high school, growing up in Southwest Florida. Back then, forecast was originally for it to go to Tampa, but small changes brought it into the Southwest Florida coast. So you always need to be prepared. You need to be watching the forecasts and find it from trusted sources, not your social media-ologists, your trusted sources like here at Tracking the Tropics with WFLA or your other local stations. If you're watching from around the Southeast, if you're watching from Savannah, of course, WSAV will always have the best reliable information for you. And that's the best thing that you can do to protect yourself and to protect your family.
And that brings us to a really nice comment that's come in. Hey, Rebecca, these weekly updates really help my overall understanding of what to expect there in Seminole and the science that goes into forecasting. We appreciate it. Well, we appreciate you guys. And this is our regular weekly update, even though it did have a whole lot going on with it. Now, if one of these systems gets named, we'll probably hop right back on here on Tracking the Tropics throughout the week just to let you know what's going on so that you don't have any worries and that you can get that trusted information like Scott was just saying. But otherwise, if nothing happens between now and next Tuesday, we will see you here Tuesday at 12:30. I want to send a big thank you to Scott Roberts, the chief meteorologist at our sister station in WSAV, and a huge thank you to meteorologist Juliana Mejia. She works very hard on these graphics. She does all the heavy lifting for this show and makes sure that you guys have all the information you need. Here from the WFLA Stream Center, I'm going to bid you guys a good afternoon, and I hope we don't talk until next Tuesday.